senator representing Kogi Central, Natasha has been suspended from the Senate for 6 months. But before that, she tendered a sexual harassment petition against Senate President Godswill Akpabio on the floor of the upper legislative chamber. The Kogi senator moved to submit her petition standing on Order 10 of privileges.
Again, I'm Senator Natasha representing the good and virtuous people of Kogi Central. And I stand on privilege 10, Order 10.
No, sorry.
No, dear Senate President, please, with due respect, do you mind? I have raised an Order 10 privileges, sir, please. I believe, and please, would you stop turning off my microphone? I represent people, and I represent women who have been silenced.
I'm hearing you.
Any senator may rise at any time to speak upon a matter of privilege suddenly arising, and he or she shall be prepared to move without notice a motion declaring that a contempt or breach of privilege has been committed. I stand and I believe herefore, sir, that your denial, your refusal to accept and treat my petition before the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges and Abuse of my privileges, and I say forth, that this matter is not subject, it is not before the court. The matter before the court is on the defamation and cyberbullying statements made by your special assistant on new media, Mr. Patrick Umfom, who addressed my decent outfits as transparent, thereby depicting that I walk sedulously and naked to the chambers. That is the nature of the petition, of the case in court. This petition, sir, has never been filed. The petition that alleges, or should I say, accuses you of making sexual harassment moves, abusing your office, and making malicious obstructions to my legislative functions has not been tendered anywhere before, no court in Nigeria. You may recall, sir, that on Friday in Arise TV, I did make some statements. And I have decided to narrow these statements in a formal petition against the President of this Senate. So if it may please you, I would humbly step forward and lay this petition.
You may proceed.
Well, in the meantime, Senate President Godswill Akpabio has denied ever sexually harassing any woman, stating during Wednesday's plenary that he has the highest regard for women because he and his siblings were raised by their late single mother, who died in 2000, though through very difficult times.
I would like to state clearly that at no time did I ever attempt any sexual harassment on the said distinguished Senator Akpabio or any other woman, for that matter. I and my siblings were raised very well by my late single mother. She died in year 2000, through very difficult times, and I therefore have the highest regards for women. Even at demise, I still cry till today. I also wish to state that I also have 4 beautiful daughters. So at no time will I ever harass any woman, and I've never done so.
Well, those were inserts from the 2 dramatis personae in this whole sexual harassment saga. The big update, however, is that the Senate Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions Committee a short while ago came down really hard on Senator Natasha, suspending her for a period of 6 months, with a whole lot of denial of privileges and appurtenances of her office as the Senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. For a bit of focus on all of that, we are now being joined by a former member of the Cross River State House of Assembly, Cletus Obun. Many thanks for joining us on Newsday.
Thanks for having me this afternoon.
Well, let's start, with the breaking news. Natasha has been suspended for 6 months, but did she receive a fair hearing during the committee's investigation, and were her rights as a senator respected?
Well, let me say that on this matter of conduct on the floor of the House, there is abundant evidence before Nigerians and the entire world that her conduct did not in any way show respect for the Senate and that institution of the legislature. Therefore, when the Privileges Committee, Ethics and Privileges Committee of the Senate sits, she laid a petition, and there is no way that she would not have had fair hearing. Otherwise, when she raised the privileges and thereafter she has opportunity to ventilate herself about the issue of fair hearing. And let me state this. When on the floor of the House, she presented her petition against all the instructions and rules of the House, it took the other senators to point that out. But the humility and transparency that the Senate President exhibited by allowing her and waiving every rule of the House to ensure that she was heard and to present and ventilate herself was a demonstration that fair hearing was indeed guaranteed and assured. And today's decision by the Ethics Committee and the unanimous decision by even the minority leader, if you heard the majority leader talking on the floor, he said even the minority leader is not opposed to the decision of the entire House. Therefore, fair hearing was not only guaranteed, but was seen to have been ensured and assured before this decision was taken. Best of the knowledge and before the entire public, and from the live sitting, if you remember, that this matter was carried live by your station, which showed that there was nothing to hide for the whole world to see, then you can assure yourself that Senator Akpabio and the Senate, as it presently constituted, has demonstrated the highest level and acquitted itself. The Senate has acquitted itself as not being a parliament of fowls, as was propounded by Jonathan Swift in the 18th century. So what we saw was a drama of the absurd to cure an absurdity. And that absurdity has been cured by the action taken by the Senate today when it took that decision to suspend its member who flaunted its rules. Whatever any other matter that comes after this is a different kettle of fish completely. What was at issue, which Nigerians were being diverted from, was the issue of breaking the rules when the decision was taken by the presiding officer of the Senate, as enshrined by the rules of the Senate, that a seat should be changed, and it became so excessively dramatized by a drama queen who has made it a point of duty to embarrass the entire institution of the legislature. And let Nigerians know that if you remove the legislation, there is no democracy. So to desecrate it also is not just an aberration, it is also an abomination. And I think that the Senate took a right decision, acquitted itself by swiftly taking action to ensure that democracy is sustained by the institution that forms the fulcrum and pivot upon which all democracies devolve and revolve on earth. Therefore, today's fair hearing or no fair hearing was sufficiently demonstrated by your live coverage of the incident and of the sitting of the Senate and the unanimous decision that no dissenting voice ever took place. Even those who dissented were only amending not to carry along others who are not affected. For example, the intervention by Senator Ojus Okalu that the 8th should not be affected by the sanctions was in order. It shows the maturity of the Senate that it was not just being punitive, it was only being corrective, and that the 6 months was indeed a very mild way to deal with the situation. And let me add that the women folk and indeed public officers may have in future to be subjected to a mental stability test in order that you qualify to be a governor, a councillor, or a senator. Otherwise, you are going to get this anti-market, especially at a time when we're asking for gender inclusion and gender equality. We are at this point facing this situation in which a gender issue is being trivialized and demonized and over-dramatized on the floor of the highest legislative house in this country, the largest black nation on earth, and the largest black democracy in the world. I think this is a fitting closure to this drama that was started from nowhere to this level of absurdity. And I want to commend the Senate for doing this and taking this action so swiftly and not allowing it to soar into another level of triviality and diversion. At a time our country is on trial over several economic and social upheavals and security issues, we are talking about seating arrangements, about those who are brought into the Nigerian Senate and into legislative positions and decision-making that will alleviate the sufferings of the people of Nigeria and those who voted people into power are now being dealt with and dished out trivialities about how to sit and where to sit. How does that change your opinion of anybody? How does that change your opinion and your value or your integrity?
Mr. Obun, thank you. There is a lot to unpack from what you just said. First of all, this is a display of absurdity in many ways than one. But don't you think it's a little bit harsh to declare that females should be subjected to mental stability tests when the same could be said about the male colleagues? Let's do remember that this is about sexual assault and the things that have spiraled out of control therefore. But some individuals are criticizing, and I want to know what you think about this criticism. How can the person being investigated or the person who is involved in such a catastrophic, shameful display of drama be the one to preside over the issues of the day? How fair does that present itself, not only for the optics amongst Nigerians, but just for general humanity? We never see situations where the person under scrutiny is also in charge of delegating the sentence to the person accusing them. So what do you make of those criticisms?
This is a very misleading criticism, extremely misleading in two ways. First, the issue under review, the matter under discussion, the subject matter was never about sexual harassment. Therefore, nobody was on trial on that floor. The second point to be made is that assuming without conceding that the matter was about sexual harassment, investigations could not be taken on the floor of the House. There are committees responsible for that. And accordingly, her allegations were referred to a committee. So what was at issue, which people are diverting and which we are calling diversionary, is that we are discussing the issue of conduct on the floor of the House. Even among robbers, there are rules. You can't accept to be a member of a particular body or organization and turn around to repudiate, reject, neglect, or refuse to obey the rules that accompany that. You cannot enjoy rights and privileges without accepting responsibilities. One of the responsibilities of belonging to such a place is accepting to obey and abiding by the rules. And this is what was at issue. Never the issue of sexual harassment. That matter is referred to a committee. Senator Akpabio can never be a chairman of the Ethics and Privileges Committee. The subject matter presently is different. So it is misleading to suggest that an accuser is presiding over his own case. The second point to make, again, is that the issue of sexual harassment arose after 2 years. If you even want us to go there, I don't want us to glorify the inglorious. It's an inglorious thing to say. And like Caesar's wife, anybody climbing to the Senate, the highest chamber in this country, should live above suspicion and above frivolities. And these trivialities must have to stop. And I think that by the end of the investigation by the committee, even if you want an independent investigation, it will be trite to say that it has nothing to do with the conduct of a member of a legislative house anywhere in the world. Nigeria, including the Nigerian Senate and the House of Reps, including the all state houses of assembly, are members of the International Parliamentary Union, are members of the African Parliamentary Union, are members of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Union. And indeed, having signed on to that, it means that all rules and privileges attached to all senators or all legislators on earth are binding on Nigerians as well. And don't forget, yesterday, the British parliamentarians, the European parliamentarians were on the floor of that house when the Senate president read his rebuttal and the charges against him and the allegations against him. So it is only befitting that it took the maturity of a Senator Akpabio to manage that situation. Otherwise, it would have spiraled, like you said. It would have exacerbated and snowballed into an international disgrace on the floor of the House. For example, if he had said that you have breached the rules of presentation of petitions, like his colleagues pointed out. The rules are before her. She was reading Rule 10 and wouldn't read Rule 70, Stop 4, which prevents her from presenting a petition herself, that it has to go through a third party. She doesn't read that rule. It is only Rule 10. If you must accept privileges, you must take responsibility and accept your responsibilities as well. So I think that it is misleading to say that Akpabio presided over a case in which he was being indicted. He was not indicted for the misconduct of Senator Natasha. It was never the case. So let us not mislead the public and mislead Nigerians into believing that the issue at stake was sexual harassment. It is clearly diversionary, it is clearly unwarranted, it is clearly childish, juvenile, and unacceptable. And that conduct, and clearly as the Senate has taken a position, has demonstrated that the Senate of Nigeria has acquitted itself and has demonstrated that it is not a parliament of ours. So once again, I want to commend the Senate, I want to commend the distinguished senators who spoke on the floor, especially the minority senators in opposition, who are not sentimental, who are not emotional, because the emotional blackmail and the drama that followed would have easily swayed them to say that it was a case of victimization. I want to also add that men, there should be legislation to prevent men from allegations, false allegations. Because when these allegations are made and they are found to be false, nothing happens to the accuser. Those who make these false allegations are never punished.
Well,
Reno Omokri's case is still pending. He was falsely accused. At no time did he get there.
Obun, if I may interject. From what you have said so far, I noticed two things. You said she's making the accusation after 2 years. So in other words, are you saying that time erases a crime? And then you've also talked about the fact that when false allegations have been made, was any investigation conducted to determine whether allegations were true or false? Those are some of the questions that arose from the answer that you gave. But for the sake of time, you said that the Senate has taken a position. Some will say that the Senate took a position against a court order. Yesterday, there was an interim order from a federal high court restraining the Senate from investigating Senator Natasha's recent actions. Now the Senate has gone ahead and she's been punished for her actions. How law-abiding then does that make the Senate?
Now, let me first give you the first clarification. It is a constitutional enshrinement. It is a constitutional enactment, not even an act of the National Assembly. Any matter pending before a court of law shall not be discussed by any legislative house in Nigeria. Conversely, no court in Nigeria shall interfere in a matter under consideration by any legislative house. This matter was on the floor of the legislative house, and the court went ahead to give an order. That order is an illegal order and ought to be disregarded. Therefore, what you are saying is that the court itself did not obey the Constitution of Nigeria. The Constitution of Nigeria requires, otherwise, a man can just go to court and say, don't pass a budget. And the entire Nigeria will be thrown into confusion because a court said so. And that is why the makers and framers of our Constitution ensured that courts do not interfere in legislative matters. And that is why you must also take note of the quasi-judicial powers of the parliament and the quasi-legislative powers of the courts. And that's why when the courts make decisions and make judgments, they become law. And that's why laws by the legislation can also become binding. A legislative house can issue a warrant of arrest, which is the duty of a court. But under our Constitution, a legislative house, whether it is a House of Assembly or a National Assembly, any chamber of the National Assembly, can issue a warrant where a matter within its legislative jurisdiction is tampered with. A legislative house is empowered by the Constitution to issue a warrant. In that case, you can see that the concept of the separation of powers is not exclusive. It is mutually inclusive. The intentment of the makers and framers of the law and those who advocate for constitutional democracy envisage that there are times in which all arms of government must, like a marble cake, interweave and intertwine and interact. So the question about the legislature not obeying a court order, it was an illegal order. In any case, let me even tell you, whether within the military or even within an age grade in the villages, it is impossible for you to obey illegal orders. The fact that a man is at war or an army is at war, and then you meet a woman with her hands up with her child on her breast, and the commander says you should shoot the woman. It's an illegal order. A soldier is not bound to carry out such an order. So also it is that the legislative house has powers not to accept an order that interferes with its own jurisdiction. That is to say that while that matter was pending before the legislative house, it was misleading for a judge to have, in the first place, dabbled into it. That is meddlesome interloper. The court at that point was a meddlesome interloper.
Well, well, very well said. I really don't know what... But just one follow-up question before I let you go. You know, I'm wondering what message you think this whole drama that has played out between Senator Natasha and the Senate President, what message do you think it sends to women and marginalized groups about the willingness of the Senate to address issues of harassment and abuse of power? Very briefly, please, because we're out of time.
Now, because we live in just because we live in a masculine world as Africans, the torment and torture of women. I heard one of the women, I think it was Olujimi also, one former senator, who made the point that what men go through as harassment is never reported because it will be seen as a weakness in men. And it was Senator Florence Ragwa also said to be harassed in the Senate as a senator being a female is also a sign of weakness. Most men endure harassment without making noise about it. I am a victim, I can tell you that. I've been a victim of sexual harassment by married women. As a legislator, I was sexually harassed on several occasions. I escaped, but I can't report, the reason being that it is not sin of a man and it is not possible for a man. So let me tell you this.
When you talk about sexual harassment, this particular... Is that what you're saying? Are you advocating that women should also keep quiet?
Never. Men should also not keep quiet. Men should also not keep quiet. All are victims in this game. The fact that we are Africans and do not accept male harassment does not in any way change the fact that men also go through this. And secondly, you made the point about the vitiation of crime on account of a fusion of time. That is to say that because of time, crime should be wiped out. Time has no expiry date. Remember the case of Bill Cosby. He was at 40, at 32, accused of pedophile. And at 72, when the crime was proven against him, he was still sentenced. So there is no time limit for crime. On this occasion, what I'm saying is that the manner in which it was brought out.
Mr. Cletus, that's why my colleague asked you earlier if 2 years is a statute of limitations to bring up complaints against the anybody. And you have just contradicted yourself just now.
No, I have said that there is no vitiation. What I said is that as a lawyer, Uduaghan knows, Mrs. Uduaghan, the senator, knows that credibility of a witness in a trial is very fundamental. And one of them is that a slippery witness should never be credible and can never be believable. When once or twice you are caught in the same web, saying the same thing and never at any time proving any, you shouldn't be believed. And that is the point I'm making. That she is not a credible witness, and we challenge her so that Nigerian women, because she is demarketing women by making them look as if they are not competent to be in such positions, by the kind of allegations and frivolous things she has said, well, I do think that she is demarketing women. And if not for people like other senators that were there, Ireti and others are sitting there, 3 of them have come out to speak, none for her. Not because they have been bribed. At their ages, they have seen it all. There is nothing they can gain by lying or by being envious of her. Like
this has been a very interesting discussion.
So why would she lie against such a woman?
Mr. Cletus Obun, I'm so sorry to interrupt. It has been a very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, we are out of time and we need to go.
As a young woman,
thank you so much, Mr. Cletus Obun, former Cross River State House of Assembly member, for joining us on Newsday.